Good afternoon, everybody. A very good afternoon and a very good welcome to another episode of Friday Drinks. Thank you very much for joining us. We had a slight delay. I blame the producer as always, but hopefully the show will make up for the delays. Today we have an interesting guest, a professor. Interesting. Professor Gift Mugano, who is a professor of economics. He's actually studied economics. So we are hoping that we learn quite a bit from you and understand what's actually happening in Zimbabwe, the state of the Zimbabwean economics. That's what we have termed this episode. So this is not, you're not new.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Tinashe. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah. How are you finding the weather? I mean, it's changing now. It's getting chilly in the evenings.
The weather, if the weather was the economy, I would say we are doing well. The economy is hot, the weather is cool.
And sir, tell us, what are you drinking?
So today I'm having the Laphroaig quarter cask. It's another very peaty and complex whiskey to continue the cleansing rituals. So this is the last peaty whiskey in the lineup of rituals to cleanse our bar from the teetotalers. And what are the boring guys having?
Okay, so we're having an afternoon tea. I'm sure you like this.
Yeah, sure.
It's lovely. It's the New English teas. It's not as strong as Tanganda, but it's a refreshing tea. And I think it's quite appropriate, especially with the weather.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can tea be refreshing?
Well, that's the whole idea of tea, actually.
You're doing cleansing.
To the audience, the producer insists that we have our tea in coffee mugs because they're branded appropriately. But who are we to complain? Tofadzamtengi.
That's the right attitude.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about yourself, Prof.
Well, look, I'm a professor of economics, as you said. I'm associated with the Durban University of Technology, a professor there, as well as Nelson Mandela University. I focus on research, mainly. I don't teach, but we are focusing on PhD supervision and as well as development research programs for the faculty. I am a global authority on international trade and finance. I've written books on trade, which are on Amazon. One book is Trade Liberalization, the Economic Development in Africa. The other one is on SME, Special Economic Zones. It's also a book on Amazon. The other one is on SMEs, how SMEs are contributing to development in Africa. The fourth one is on globalization of higher education. That one is very interesting on the sense that it seems to be an education book, but it's an economics book focusing on how the education system has become internationalized. So our education system must not only conform to local development from a policy perspective. And that is why you see in our best university is ranked above 2,000 in the world. It has not taken the agenda for globalization.
All right.
But if you look at South African universities, they have taken that agenda. That's why you see we're exporting more students to South Africa. So that book is quite interesting. So that's about myself. I focus on research. I have no constituents, as I told you in the beginning, in terms of protocol. I'm an independent person. And
researcher.
I speak my mind.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
So which school would you sympathize with? You know, there's the Austrians, there's the Keynesians. Where would you place yourself?
I'm in the neoclassical school. I'm a liberal economist.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe in free market with a strong institutions.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're in good company.
Okay.
So to kick off, what we're going to talk about, this week there was a hive of activity. I termed it sixes and sevens as far as cabinet is concerned. First of all, we had a general notice, 635 of 2023. You know, we're just in May, but this was a general notice 635 from the Chief Secretary of the President and Cabinet. Special procurement in the public interest and with specific sector being the health sector. where it said, it is hereby notified that the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe has, in terms of Section 3(6) of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act, declared the following to be national interest and shall not be publicly disclosed. So, in essence, they can spend this money and they shall not disclose how much they've actually spent on them. But that didn't last. We then had a statement. So that was already promulgated, but we had a statement from the Office of the President, again, Mishek Subanda, and this was a press statement, and he said, His Excellency, the President, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, has been made aware of some document gazetted as General Notice 635 for 2023 purporting to place the procurement of certain goods outside of public scrutiny on the grounds of national interest. Upon further investigation, it has come to light that the so-called government gazette notice is a nullity, having been published without the authorization and without the signature of the Chief Secretary of the President. So let's just look back. Yes, it didn't have the signature, but Nick Mangwana put it out there.
Correct.
You know, bearing in mind that Eddie Cross said he's a propagandist, but he put it out there. He's the chief public speaker for the public spokesperson for government, but he put it out there and it was generally recognized, and the lawyers tell us that this promulgation is still in effect. But what do you make of this? Before the week has ended, Mutuli again then comes up with his own statement. But I just want to get a sense of what is actually happening in cabinet.
Yeah. This is quite unfortunate to start with, because if there was a government of national unity, I would think that it's the other side which is playing tricks. But when there's one government with one spokesperson who is confirming the very same statutory instrument of the Gazette, and even when there was a public outcry, he was actually adamant. That's a good thing. He was speaking about our health condition, in justifying everything. So I can tell you, you don't want to be a rocket scientist. Nick is not dumb.
No, by any measure, he's not dumb.
He's not. So he would have checked, and he was satisfied that this is an official document, because if he spoke from an unofficial document, I don't think he should be in office even today. He was supposed to be fired. So I would want to argue that this is an official document. The second statement by the Chief Secretary could be clearly read as a way of retraction after having seen the public outcry, and one would want to say maybe they were testing the waters to see how patient we are on this. Well, this is a scheme which has been set for purely corruption, nothing else. And it's unfortunate that the government is actually, there's an English phrase which says, in life, when you're explaining, you are losing. And I would want to suggest, because I know government follows this program, that this is a situation which should be taken seriously, and the government must not put itself in this situation where they're explaining. Because in this instance, they are losing.
Rufaro, what do you make of it? These 6s and 7s in cabinet.
Look, I don't know. I think it's much ado about nothing really. They did something that turned out not to be hold up to sunlight. We've seen this before many times when there was the announcement about lending, where with immediate effect.
Exactly a year ago.
There wasn't going to be any lending. It was clearly not well thought out. They had clearly not consulted the banking sector and the market, and they realized that they were wrong, and they backed down. So actually, I think it's my bias is to tend to look at these things quite positively when they have an idea that is clearly corrupt or not going to work, and then within a week they do a U-turn. I think that's fantastic. I actually look at it as a positive. Where we have issues is the bad policies that don't get reversed, that are still on the books, that are still hurting the economy.
Okay. So having said that, what I want us to discuss, because the feeling I get is the 6s and 7s are really driven by the election cycle, that we are, in essence, in an election season. So what I want to understand from you, Prof, is election cycles and the economy. What is the true cost of an election in Zimbabwe?
It's a very important question, but I think to quantify the cost from a monetary point of view is very difficult. But I would want to combine election and politics, so that I'm able to show you the disaster which politics has played in our economy. And I will take you to 14 November 1997, when the Black Friday took place. And in essence, if you look at the events, because why I'm saying so, we have gone through 25 years in the same
cycle.
cycle. The major drivers of the crash of the Zimbabwean dollar was the issuance of unbudgeted money to war veterans. And clearly at that time, there was a lot of political dynamics. There were civil unrest, there were riots. So government, whenever there is that kind of instability from the society, they always use money to pump. And we lost investments. And that's when we began to face the genesis of capital flight.
I want to just inject a fun fact there. So Delta had its briefing this week, and one of the things that we learned was that they did 4 million hectoliters of sorghum beer for their March 2023 year end. That's the second highest sorghum beer sales that they've ever had. The highest sales they had was in 1997, when those lump sum
you see, very interesting.
payments were made. So it's a I thought it was a fun anecdote.
That's true.
So
you're looking at it from an opportunity cost perspective, and
correct.
you're saying that this has been running now for close to 25 years. And every 5 years, what tends to happen is when there's political pressure of any sort from any constituency, the government panics and they resort to just money printing.
Correct. Then if I can now add on to what you are saying, what Prof said. Now, when we were in the early 2000s, we would know that the cost of election became quite expensive the month of the year of the elections. But in recent years, starting from 2013 and 2018, elections mode starts after the elections are done. So if you look at 2018.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
2018, 2013, I'll give 2013. When we ended the unit government, Honorable Betty had a budget surplus. He was averaging $250 million, US dollars. And he was on a mode of we eat what we kill. Now, you are talking about the cost. The Minister Chinamas came in immediately after taking over as ZANU-PF government, control of the government. He took the lead off the port. And we moved from a budget surplus of $250 million to 2018 August national debt of $9.4 billion, right?
In 5 years.
Yeah, in 5 years. Because now that's where you begin now this command agriculture, and subsidies, you see. And on 1 August, after the elections, there was shooting. And the Minister Finance came in with his budget, and which it
was a surplus.
Surplus, which has never been a surplus. And you saw what happened on our current cycles, how we've lost our Zim dollar, and how we have lost on inflation petrol. And what did we get in between? We get command agriculture, we get from Vutsa, we get presidential goats, presidential poultry, presidential cotton, presidential horticulture. Everything is with a presidential prefix. So what has happened means we are now using money to campaign from 1 August 2018 to date. The budget for 28, which is my last point, 2023, 4.5 trillion, when it was presented, it was massive. They were not supporting fundamentals to qualify that size of the budget because the GDP was expected to grow by 3%, but the increase in the budget was above 100% of the previous budget. You get what I'm saying? So already, and if you look at its allocation, which is very important, it's going to ministries which have to do with the politics, your defense, your war veterans. It's going to agriculture, it's going to even president's office getting $160 billion, right? So the point I'm making is that our budget also reflects the mode of the election, and that's why you see when we discuss further, the rate is running out. What is the cost? The cost is quite massive.
Okay, so our primary audience is business, and we get worried because in all our analysis, what we tend to look at is the cost of the actual election. So, the 6 months before the election. And what you're coming out and actually telling us is, guys, that's actually the more benign expenditure. What comes after is even worse.
Correct.
So then my natural question to you is why?
No, it's clearly very simple. It's an issue of sustaining power, maintaining power. African politics is very simple. Those who are in office, if you look at even some of the things which I was asking when I was looking at the expenditure, last year government was saying they're going to be supporting 3 million households with the Fumvudza. But when you look at Zimstad's figures, we have around below 2.5 million households. So already the budget is actually for more than...
Yeah, it's actually 3.8 million households.
Yeah.
When Zimstats is actually saying that all our households are 3 million.
Yeah, correct.
The entire nation.
Yeah. There's a variance. So the whole idea is to buy votes. I mean, there's no question about that.
So are you saying that they start buying votes at the beginning of the 5-year cycle?
Exactly. So yesteryears we used to know that the elections there will be more spending in the last 6 months, and the government would actually adhere to the complaints of civil servants in the last 6 months. If you remember yesteryears, teachers will be given their money. Now government don't listen to teachers, they don't listen to nurses because they have seen that they don't vote for them. You see, they listen to the constituents where the votes are coming from. That's why you hear from Vodza. That's why you see Command Agriculture, the Rural Development Program, which has got 8 focus areas where you talk of the goats, the chicken, the poultry, the fisheries, cotton, horticulture, innovation, and intervention in the rural areas. The idea is to make sure that the electorate is very happy. But the challenge which you are facing now, business, as you are saying, when you are having subsidies and distortions, it affects the normal running of markets. Because, for example, if I am in the value chain of agricultural sector as an example, very difficult to contract farmers who are supposed to be adhering to the tenets of contract farming when the very same farmers are being given free inputs. That's why you see that we are in short supply of basic commodities like soybean, but we are not in short supply of tobacco. Why? Because tobacco, there's no elections in election year in tobacco. Okay. The market system which is working, and we are exporting. We are actually top 5 in the world. Right. So that's the basic thing. The business sectors in that value chain where there is campaigning, they suffer the consequence of subsidies.
What's your view on this, on the cost of an election cycle? What Prof is actually telling us is, guys, be less worried about what is actually spent before the election. What tends to happen post the election is the real cost.
So my philosophy has always been, or my thinking around this is that if the economy is doing well, if it's thriving, if it's growing, if there's prosperity, that's good for whoever is holding office under such a scenario. And they are much more likely to win elections and hold power in that scenario. And one of the things that I think the business community has failed to do is to make this case, this compelling case that actually, if you free up the economy, you liberalize, you're going to enjoy so much more growth, you're going to create prosperity, and you can hold power for as long as you like. So why do you think that narrative isn't
strong enough?
Or we haven't succeeded in selling that narrative because...
Yeah. But, the business community, not all of them, they're also guilty to this electioneering. Because the government does not provide service to itself. Who is in the tenders? It's the business community. And even if they are not in tenders, there's an auction system where you also benefit from distorting policies. So the challenge which we have, I don't think we have, that's my view, this can be disputed. We don't have a united business which is forward-looking, which is looking at a bigger picture. I once told one politician that you must do, he was a minister, and he was a he. You must do good in office for you to be able to sustain your businesses. If we are not getting decent salaries and the economy is not working, you're going to get broke. He laughed at me and said, we are politicians. But right now he is out of business, he's living like as poor as a church mouse. You see. So the challenge which are business facing, they look at those who are involved in these deals, whether it's construction, whether it's in supplying of tender program, I mean, service to government. They see it as an opportunity because business also look at elections as an opportunity and supplying all those chemicals. So there's division within business, but there are some who are innocent, who are suffering because it's not about the voice, which voice carries the day.
But Rufaro's point is, even those who are very sectarian interest, have sectarian interest, is they would benefit also. If this Morgan economy was a $100 billion economy, even if you're close to the politicians, you would benefit more.
Correct.
Rather than with an economy that's just at best $20 billion.
Correct.
So if you think about it, if you're winning tenders in a $100 billion economy, you would do so much more.
Yeah, it needs someone who is pragmatic, who understands that. Because I remember the phrase I used to do to this politician, which is similar to business, which I would want to say, is that an island of wealth in a sea of poverty is not sustainable. So, but the challenge now, the islands feel so comfortable that at this time okay, because they're not getting pink and go actually. You get the point? Without knowing that the poverty is going to submerge that whole island. This is where we are right now today. The same politician should also not even be waiting for business, is what is suggesting. I buy his idea. But if I am a politician, I should also be seeing a bigger economy for me to even have a better stake if I am in contract. Let's take it in the devil's advocate, right? But we are fighting over a very small economy, right? And when they steal, we can see that they've stolen because all of us can feel it, you see. So there's a dearth in reasoning across politicians and also business sector.
Okay, I think you've actually answered the more important question on what's going to happen after the elections. So I guess the question is, and you've partly answered it, but what could we push as a business interest post-September?
After
the elections
are
done, what could we push?
That's very important. So first, we business now, I want to borrow what Rufaro was now saying. That what we need to understand, we need a big economy. We need a stable economy. We need a stable currency. So business, through the associations, through your platforms, through various sectors, we need to have national dialogue as a starting point. And I would want to remind you of the Langawe dialogue of 1995. Where they went into serious dialogue, say, that's Malaysia. We now need to chart a new course. No, we as Zimbabweans were very educated. We can't afford to go into these cycles of today is Zim dollar, tomorrow is US dollar. And where is our education and where is our rationale? You're talking about the cost of these elections and politics into business. Things have been bad. So I would want to call for one, national dialogue, which is informed by evidence, and we have a social contract. Government, labor, and business to say, we are charting next 5 years. We don't want 600 or so statutory instruments. We don't want corruption. We don't want, so we are kind of confessing to our sins to each other. And we agree on how we're going to be working together. If it is about strengthening institutions, business working in an ethical and moral way, if we leave this to say politicians are doing this and we are blaming, like what happened from 1 August 2018 to date, it's a blame game. And you see even the policies which are coming, it's a reaction. Some of them are going to come to them in our discussion, obviously. But it's a reactionary policy to fix someone who is seen to be sabotaging the economy. So we need a national consensus. Otherwise, the next 5 years will be hell.
Okay. Is something that you buy, Ruvara?
Yeah, look, I think, from where I'm sitting, certainly the business community is guilty of not articulating a vision, with one voice. Yeah. You have, all these different organizations, and once in a while they'll issue a public statement or they'll make noise about something, but you actually don't know what businesses' view is for the most part. So certainly, we in the business community are guilty of not articulating a singular vision. And I also think that we don't engage, so we are not trusted. We're seen as partners. We are seen often as profiteers, as bogeymen and saboteurs. When we are just expressing an opinion sometimes about certain things not working. So certainly the engagement hasn't been there. So those are two, so I tend to agree that the Prof that we there has to be some dialogue. There has to, and this shouldn't just happen post-election. It should be on an ongoing basis, because
to depoliticize the economy.
And discussion about economic policy.
Yeah, because that's what we need. We need to actually move away from the politics and in fact ensure that politics runs just the course of the electioneering period. And then beyond that, we need to depoliticize the whole society and we focus on the economy. Okay, having said that, now we just want to focus on a particular thing that happened just yesterday, and this is Muthuli's statement, which really the objective was to stabilize the economy, the macroeconomic problems. I think in its preamble, it speaks about growth in the economy and then says, but there are these concerns that the minister has, and he was going to address those concerns, and he had 7 points in which to address those concerns. Some of which we can speak about: 100% retention of domestic foreign currency earnings, adoption of external loans, and we'll go into the details. But to start off with, what I want to understand is, when you're reading that statement, is this a political or an economic statement coming from our good Professor Mthuli?
I like the prefix of Professor, Mthuli, because he is a fundi, and one thing which he knows is that whenever providing solution, you must diagnose the problem, just like medical doctors. Medical doctors will never just give you a prescription without a thorough diagnostic of your ailment, and you must be convinced that we are together. That's why you see when we go to medical doctors, when you have sugar, diabetes, and it is come to a difficult position, you even agree to let your leg go. But if Mthuli was my medical doctor, I will not allow him to cut my leg, because you might cut your leg when he must cut your hair. That's what happened when he was reading this statement. It was a wish-wash statement at the beginning, where he's trying to give us assurance that things are working. So to me, it became political, because he's a minister of finance, and he's a decorated professor. And I must be very honest with him. Before I became a professor, when I was still a junior academic, he was my role model. I used to keep his CV. I remember I downloaded from African Development Bank, but I think now it's in my bin. Because I realized that I was keeping a wrong CV. The point I want to say is that he did not come out very clear to say our challenge right now, from the economic perspective, is a monetary phenomenon. Because I would want to argue that the rate is running away, and the major driver is money supply and liquidity. So you then see, as we discuss one by one, that he did not offer sufficient measures to deal with the liquidity. And even on the monetary side, he did not offer sufficient measures to deal with that. Then, most importantly, he did not also speak about the currency issue, to say, this Zim dollar where it is, should we continue with Zim dollar? Or should we go to US dollar? And that is a position where he missed. And there were two options. To say, if he goes for a Zim dollar, he was supposed to be very exclusive than to be selective, which will come back and look at one by one. You can't then identify levies and ignore taxes.
We'll get into the details, but I need to just push back a bit with what you said. He is a decorated professor.
Correct.
By all intents and purposes, one of the best academics to actually come out of Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
He's probably cleverer than the three of us combined, surely he's not a dum-dum. Yeah. Would you be any different if we were to put you into that hot seat? Would you be any different? Or we would also sit here and say, this was a professor I used to admire. I kept his CV, but look at what he's doing now. And you're somebody that I actually respect, but Professor Ntuli is not a dum-dum.
Yeah. There's one thing which let's agree. Beyond Zimbabwe, he is a decorated professor in Africa. Zimbabwe is too small for him. But I don't know what is happening to him in government. But whatever is happening is very bad. Because that I can forgive him. Where I have an issue with our Minister of Finance is his confidence in lying. Right? And in saying things which are not correct. Like protecting a wrong position. It was better for him if to resign and say, I think when I came here, I was expecting this environment. But what I am seeing and the push factors which are inside here and the dynamics are not for my type. I will give you my own personal example. I was the chairman of Cisco. And I was happy when I was appointed chairman of Cisco. I only lasted 10 months and I resigned. Because I realized that I cannot serve in that position as a chairman of Cisco. Because it was going to take away my integrity as a professor of economics and what I believe in. But the challenge of our professor is that he does not represent us very well. And now,
Maybe he can't resign. I mean, let's try and actually
we're
understand.
not asking him to resign, but I'm simply saying, clearly, when you are an academic of that nature, a global authority, he's a global authority, very respected. He must stand up to his stature for the sake of his integrity and for the sake of all of us who are looking at him. Remember I said his CV now is in the dustbin. I could not keep it because there's nothing to admire anymore. The results which are coming out now are not making sense. So,
but I'm going to push back a little bit there and be the devil's advocate and present a different perspective. What if he's a man holding his nose and push? What if he's a man who's holding his nose, and as bad as the economic policies are today, they would have been much, much worse if he wasn't there.
No. I would want to argue even a historian would have done a good job than him. Yeah. Honorable Chinamasa had a difficult time. But I thought he was not doing a good job. But I would want to say, regardless of the difficulties which we faced from 2013 to 2018, he was a better Minister of Finance.
Because he was a political animal.
Look, there's always political economy. Any economist has got a political economy, and I would want to say that even Minister Biti did very well, exceptionally very well. First time, you see. And he was not an economist. So our Minister of Finance, when he came in, I was amongst the people who were saying, thumbs up, we are in for a real game. But his results are very disappointing. Right? Even if you look at, I'll give examples, announcement which he made, he would make a policy decision in a media briefing. And tomorrow he would reverse that. There's no politics there, it's your own mistakes. When he came here, what did he say about the bond notes and he said he was going to take it out. Yeah. And it was very clear, it's useless money. We're going to join the rand or the US dollar. Tomorrow he's actually supporting the US dollar. That's where we have issues. So they are I will talk about how he...
Can you see his evolution into politics? Because now he's running in political office. Because maybe he does recognize that what Chinamasa and BT had in this particular office was political clout, and he doesn't have the political clout. Would it be any different now that he's actually running? Suppose he actually wins and he's in parliament.
Do you want to be a politician to know economics and to balance a budget and to pronounce good policy measures? You don't need to be a politician. You just need to have, there should be political will for you to be heard. And I think there's no doubt that the President Mnangagwa, gave him support. There's a very clear sentiment that the Minister of Finance, if there's any minister who got political support to run away, to run his course, it is him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings us to something that's actually happening where, Professor Mtuli was now dabbling in monetary matters, and, the antagonism between central bank and the Treasury, it's now glaring. It's now obvious.
Yeah,
It's
sorry,
now
just before we get into the weeds, I just want to speak to, at a high level, the document.
Sure.
And make the point that the audience for this is not the business world or the capital markets or the bankers. It's a political audience, which is why.
So you also agree that it was.
Yeah. So because it's basically this narrative that everything is okay and it's getting better, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Right. If the intended audience was the business community and the market at large, there would have been an engagement, where he would have reached out to some of the key players. And
he actually says it's after consultation. The statement is actually.
That would disagree as we continue.
Right. And had a conversation, guys, how are you seeing things? What should we, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you think it'll work? And you'd actually see, you'd actually reading through the document, get a sense for the market's thinking and position from the things that he's saying. There's nothing in there that speaks to any engagement with the kind of thinking that's in the business community, in the market. So we're not the
target audience.
The target audience. So if you analyze it in economic terms, objectively. I mean, you're going to find.
All right. I think, having said that from both of you, I'm not going to then get into the weeds, but I'll just remain as broad as possible because there's certain things that we must discuss. So we're not going to discuss each particular item, but just some of the things that he commented on that I found worrying, and I would want to hear what you guys think. So the first one is the Treasury now dabbling in monetary matters. What's your position on this? I mean, he came out quite clearly as if he is now the Monetary Policy Committee, setting exchange rate, looking at foreign exchange auction system, things that for
interest rate,
for the longest have been the purview of the RBZ. But here we see him coming out very strong in these matters.
Yeah, so Tinashe, this is very worrying. And at one point when I read that statement, I thought it was a joint statement. So when I went down, I was looking for signature of the Governor of Central Bank and the Minister of Finance. Maybe they're speaking together. And there was no signature of the Minister of Finance. And I was reminded that in ZITF, he mentioned, I think it was business.
Yes, he did.
That I'm going to...
He threatened business.
Yes. Yeah. And so I want to qualify that this is not by mistake. It is something which he actually planned and is doing deliberately because he spoke as authoritatively, and we are just a week or so from 2 weeks or so, is implementing it. Now, the challenge it gives now, remember we have a drought of confidence, right? Where our central bank is tainted because of the politics which accompanied. And so is our financial markets. Now the Minister of Finance make things worse. It means central bank is not there. He is now the governor of central bank. He is now the Minister of Finance. Is holding two heads. So that's where the challenge is now. And the independence of central bank, which matters as far as our expectations, economists is concerned, is no longer there. I mean, it was not there, but it's been qualified now without any reasonable doubt. Now, beyond business, people whom we're talking about right now, investors, when they also read this statement, they will not bring their money to Zimbabwe because there's no independence, there are no strong institutions. And if you were the board of central bank, would you have resigned? Say, the Minister of Finance have taken over, run your central bank. Yes.
So I think there's some important context that we need to use as a basis to judge the statement. Because over the last 5 years, every time the rate has run quite a bit, there has been some very aggressive policy action to try and stop the rate from moving, bring it back, bring currency stability. And in the context of the policy actions that we've witnessed, this is actually very mild. I mean, previously we had a freezing of lending. We had the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange being shut down for more than 30 days. We've had lists of accounts being announced as frozen, people being arrested. We've had some pretty dramatic policy actions in response to a period where the rate moves quite aggressively. And if you look at the rate over the last 2-3 weeks, it has moved from, say, 2000 to where it is now. So it's been quite an aggressive move. And as a response, this actually, it's not going to
Well, I think the
move the
worry-
needle, but it's pretty, it seems relatively tame versus what we've seen before.
No, I disagree with him. This is not mild. He said that short-term interest rates are going to go up. And if you read the statement carefully, you are guaranteed these interests will go up in 2 currencies, in US dollar and also in what? In Zim dollar, right?
But will that move the needle?
No, the point I want to make is that for business now, they will not agree with it, this will be mild, because already, imagine how much are you charging interest in US dollars? Around 17-18%, right? And if they go up to 20 or so, who is going to sustain those rates in US dollars? The same applies Zim dollar, right? And if it goes up, remember we at one point we're 200%. And this is a minister who threatened business. So what I'm carrying here is not, I'm seeing where the rates will be.
But is that a big deal?
Okay,
So,
gentlemen.
yeah.
Okay, no. The problem is we're now getting into the weeds, and I don't want us to get into the weeds.
Okay.
Sure.
Right. What I want us to discuss is this the Minister of Finance mandate?
No.
Because for the last 2 years, we've been listening to the governor, we've been engaging with the governor, and the MPC, whether they're right or wrong, have given us their stance on interest rates, have given us their stance on the
Correct.
foreign exchange market.
Correct.
Whether it's right or wrong, that's their constitutional mandate.
Correct.
If you look at the Reserve Bank Act, that's what they're supposed to do. Whereas now we see a Minister of Finance coming out very strong and taking over that role. Whether it's right or wrong, Rufaro, it's besides the point. The point that we want to highlight is, what does this mean? Especially now, because it's now clear that the central bank and Treasury have different visions.
Yeah. So it spells disaster for all of us. And unfortunately, naturally, I can say that beyond this statement, it takes away confidence. So central bank is not going to be making any decision which is different from what the minister said. That's what we are saying.
So he's read the right act.
Yes, he's read. He said it is ETF. He read the statement. So you see short-term interest going up. So the point that is central bank doing things according to the way they understand how they should direct the economy, or they're being forced.
So should
Even
the good
this-
doctor resign?
If I was him, I would resign.
No, but look, I think I look at it.
Even look
I
at it.
look at it a
Before we
bit
come
differently.
Before we come in, I was advocating for the 15% scrapping of the 15% retention on domestic deposit foreign currency. And the governor, at that point it was 20%, right? The governor of central bank in February, when he read his monetary policy statement, he reduced from 20% to 15%, right? Which I do not agree with, like as an economist. But now the Minister of Finance comes in and take it off. But it's the right thing to do, but is he the right person to do it? So what is going to happen to those monetary policy decisions which has been made by the committee in terms of governance?
But okay, so
What message are we sending?
I look at it differently. Look, so in principle, you know, the idea that it's not the minister's mandate, you guys are 100% correct. But I'm much more interested in outcomes. And
Very dangerous.
and look, I think it's in the public domain that the governor has got a few months left in his second term, and there is no precedent over the last 30 years of governors serving more than 2 terms. So he's on his way out effectively.
But I think there's still a year.
And no, I think it's March or April. It's less than a year for sure.
It's less about the person, it's
Yeah.
more about the office.
Yeah. So you know, and the truth of the matter is the current policy framework has been failing. So if the minister is going to be more assertive and push some policies that have positive outcomes, I'm all for it. I mean, yes, he shouldn't hijack the central bank's mandate, but if he does and he does good things.
Okay, so I'll tell you what my worry is, because you've asked the outcome, and I will use just one of your examples, which is the 15% retention.
Yeah.
Right? If you think about it, the 15% retention is purely a monetary phenomenon, so that was coming straight from the RBZ. But there's something that is within the purview of Treasury, which is the 4% tax.
Yeah.
Now, if he totally believed in this, why didn't he scrap that?
Exactly.
That 2% movement of which comes to about 4%. That's purely a fiscal issue. And why didn't he?
Exactly.
Why didn't he then take away that?
Yeah.
Right, and then moral suasion,
Yes,
persuade his colleague Mangujga to scrap the 15%. If he totally believed in it.
But if you could, I'm going to be a devil's advocate here and say, if you could only do one, right? If you could either scrap the 4% or the 15% retention, which would you choose as an economist? Which is better?
No.
One in which you have the constitutional mandate.
No. You guys are being pedantic about mandates.
Let's be very clear. It is not correct that one has to overstep beyond his or her mandate just to get a result. They sit in cabinet, right? They meet the president to brief the president. It's a basic phenomenon. It is known that the Minister of Finance, the governor, and various key ministers, they meet the president. They were supposed to discuss in those meetings, and the governor takes responsibility of his own area, right? This decision taken by the Minister of Finance is a political statement that he does not work well with the governor of Central Bank. And he is still the governor, even if it's 2 days to go. So you need to respect institution. So I would not want to agree. That's why I've told you that I was advocating for the scrapping of the domestic retention. But the process and the formula must be the right thing according to the mandate of organization. Imagine the Minister of Agriculture jumps into industry and commerce because they want to achieve value addition. It's a wrong thing to do.
All right, gentlemen, we must move on. We've got quite a bit to cover. The other thing that happened was the importation of basic commodities that was scrapped. Clearly, that's a political move, looking at elections and ensuring that our shelves do have products. But what's your take? What will be the impact and the effect on that?
So I think here the Minister of Finance has thrown away the baby and the water.
The bath water.
Yeah. Clearly because, and this is not the first time. And if you look at last year, again, same month, May is now an interesting month. Last year in May, the Minister of Finance again pronounced the same policy measure when the prices were going up. Remember the week when the president announced
because of COVID and global inflation,
when they suspended lending, it was last year, right? And why it was like that? Because the prices were going up when they suspended lending.
Yes.
Now the prices are going up because of the monetary phenomena and the excess liquidity. The government is not taking responsibility. It's seeing business as sabotaging them, right? What the government is not reading is one thing, that this business it requires foreign currency, right, to finance their operation, to meet the blackout of ZESA and all the operations. Even GMB is also demanding foreign currency for grain. So the basic commodity you're talking about have to be made by business when they're doing proper costing, replacement pricing, right? Now, this is a disaster. Why? Because one, we are opening the floodgates for imports, and the cross-border is going to be in.
Why is that a disaster? Actually, this is
It's a
one thing
disaster
I actually support.
The disaster that we're going to drain foreign currency, right? Instead of domesticating the foreign currency, because we're going to be draining that. Now, when the cross-border buys commodity from South Africa, right, as an example, we are deepening dollarization to go to 100%.
But they don't pay duties anyway, so they're not affected.
they don't pay duty. So, but they are rational economic agents. When they sell their commodities, they sell in US dollars, not Zim dollar, because they need to collect US dollars. So we are expediting the barrier of the Zim dollar. That's the disaster. The third point is that you are also killing industry, because you don't address industrialization and sustaining industrial growth by opening floodgates for competition to discipline them for raising the prices as if they are sabotaging, right? So this is not a good policy, and this is the evidence where Tinashe can argue that this is a clear evidence that there was no consultation. And I want to tell you without any shadow of doubt, I talked to businesses, key industries, key leaders to say, were you consulted? Those who were in this sector, they were not consulted. So you don't run an economy through emotions, and you lose the people who are supposed to be moving with you, because industry should move with the government. So they also begin to take a dig in to counter for their own safety.
No, but I want to push back here, because number one, if you're an industry and you're a local producer and you're importing your raw materials and you're getting your money at the auction, right? You already have this significant advantage of getting money at half the price. So and the duties on basic goods were not incredibly high anyway. So them being scrapped, if you've been getting money from the auction to run your factory over the last few years, you should be competitive by now. And if you can't compete, then you shouldn't be in business.
No, but Farah, just one point. I think let's qualify this. The $20 million which is being given to business every week is not enough
for their imports.
For their imports. That is given. And some companies, they've stopped going to the auction. You're talking about Delta. Have you ever seen the presentation of Delta name by Central Bank on the system for? No,
they get cash, so they don't need to go to the auction.
Because they know if they go to the auction during that time, it takes 6 months when you are there. It was an obvious reason. There was one point in time for a number of
Delta generates more cash than many exporters.
No, I'm just giving you an example. But the point that I want to say is that when the auction is not saving the whole economy, it's just very small. The point I want to make, you don't throw away the baby and
with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Okay, so my view, again, I sort of take both your views. So from your view is this must not be a reactionary policy measure. I think I get that. But I get Rufaro's point. And Rufaro's point is, this is actually a good measure if you think about it, because we've been supporting the domestic industries, the domestic importers for the last 65 years. When are they ever going to grow up, right? But I do get your point that without consultation, it being reactionary, because the problem with the policy is it will be changed again in a few weeks once industry complies.
How do you want the companies to grow when we have over 25 years of a chaotic economic environment? And any company which could have put the right measures to grow. Companies have lost their capital through the economic decay of which ended in 2008, right? And we went into US dollar environment during the unit government, and there was growth. Average growth was 10% per year, right? When we got out of it, what did we do? We lose again the US dollar, right? We got into a new dispensation, right? How many times have we changed the inflation figures?
No.
So don't blame businesses when the environment is very toxic for everyone. So when things are like that, government has a duty to have moral suasion and also take into account of their missteps. But I'm not saying business should be careless. But I don't agree to it. Remember, there was a pronouncement that we are going to set up a committee to deal with price control. This price, right? The next thing you are bringing in. To me,
I've got a question for you around these prices, because I'm tickled by the emotion and consternation around these Zim dollar prices. The government's own statistics agency, Zimstats, has pointed out that 76% of our economy is USD, only 24% is Zim dollar, and it's not static; it's dynamic. So going forward, the trend is more US dollars, less Zim dollars. So I'm vexed why anybody cares about what's happening with Zim dollars, because from my perspective, they're on their way out.
The duty. No, this is products that are coming in, and whether or not they should have a duty. Basic commodities should have duty. And just so that we move forward, I'll have
And then
I'll have the last word.
there's an interesting thing about
Okay,
around
no,
duties.
No, we have to move on. But
Okay.
I'll have the last word.
Yeah, the chairman.
I'll have the last word on this, which is.
I'm starting to miss George.
This is what George continuously does. So I get to have the last word. The point is stability helps everybody.
Yeah.
And what we need to focus on, whether we're business, whether we're government, or wherever, is to focus on stability. Because if there is stability, then businesses can plan. They can have their 10 years or 20 years to, and then you can open up the economy knowing that you at least have delivered stability and policy consistency. Because what we know is this, although it's the right thing to do from where we are sitting, we also know that it will be changed again numerous times. So there is no principle around it. And what we would want is to have principles driving our policy. But we must move on. There's another thing that our good professor totally ignored, which were treasury payments. Because what's actually driving the rate is less the printing that's coming from the central bank, but it's more Treasury making all these payments to their contractors. And he totally ignored it. And that's something within his purview.
No, you're quite right. And it's an area of concern because the excess liquidity which comes out of his budget, which we discussed even last time when we met on this forum.
Yes.
And one thing which I would have wanted to hear from him is to up the payment in US dollars to service providers, so that we minimize excess liquidity of the same dollar, which is going to contractors. Remember, just last month, government blacklisted 13 companies, if I'm not mistaken, who were seen to be participating in the black market, and these companies were getting paid by government,
Treasury.
by Treasury. And so he could have done two things, pronouncement of two things. One, he's paying suppliers on time and avoiding bulk payments which are done at one point in time, which happened in December. In December, he cleared all the payments almost like last week of December because they were holding payments from August and the rate went up. But the most effective way was government is quite a significant amount of foreign currency. During this time when there's a challenge, he was supposed to dip in those coffers and raise the payment to service provider even to 80%, 90%, so that we are able to reduce excessive liquidity coming from the treasury. And he kept quiet. And that is where he was supposed to be doing his job, not going to the government of central bank's job.
So normally I would agree with what the professor is saying. I think on this show we've been harping about printing being bad for the country for the longest time. And but I have a different perspective now. We're at 76.24, the split between USD and Zim dollars, and we're trending towards 100% dollarization. And every time that Treasury behaves badly by printing and flooding the market with Zim dollars and allowing the rate to run, all that does really is it shortens the lifespan of the Zim dollar. We were going to get to a place where it's the economy is 100% USD faster if we printed responsibility. And I actually think that we'll be better off the day after we're 100% dollarized.
No, but someone is losing something directly. There's been a video that's gone viral of nurses saying that they're actually earning close to $7 US dollars for transport, and they must come to work for 22 days. And literally it's impossible. They must pay for their uniforms, and I think it was something like $2 or something silly. That's the cost. So while you sit here and you have your cognac or whatever it is that you have, whatever it is,
okay,
and you can pontificate on.
I'm not pontificating.
You are, because you're saying that the US dollar, the quicker we get to the US dollar economy, the better.
What
but
I'm saying is,
it's coming at a cost, and the cost is the nurse who now must pay.
We've been counseling fiscal discipline. We've been counseling against spending beyond what we receive, right? We have constantly pointed out that the root cause of inflation and devaluation of the Zim dollar is this excessive money supply growth. Treasury hasn't listened to us. It is not their nature to take our counsel. So I'm saying, look, you know what? Seeing as they're not going to see,
Do you buy into this?
seeing as they're not going to do the right thing,
Rufaro, I think the issue is that, if I want to be very modest about what he's saying, the Minister of Finance is actually doing the opposite of what you're talking about. He has not touched where there's a challenge. He was supposed to have made a decision in his statement as a policy measure to say he is going to up the payment of service providers to 80% of the invoice in US dollars. So he reduces the excess liquidity going to the market. So what he's doing right now is paying them in Zim dollars.
yes.
Which is very dangerous because that is pushing the rate what? Upwards. Now, also on the teachers,
You're saying that's actually a good thing because
It's a bad thing.
No. I think
there's no dollar bill.
I think Tinashe is mischaracterizing my views.
No.
So let me explain
okay,
better
can
with an analogy, right?
Let me finish.
Okay, let him finish.
Yeah, let me finish. Are you aware that on the budget, 52% of the budget is going to civil servants, right?
Yes.
And that is where he should also make the pronouncement that instead of paying civil servants 52% of that budget, he's now upping the US dollar, right? And minimizing, even scraping the Zim dollar. So that he reduces, because now the civil servants are very dangerous. Why? Because they're talking about $2.2 trillion, right? That they're supposed to be getting from the budget. And they are facing a market which is dollarized. So when they get the Zim dollars, right, these are the nurses, these are the teachers, they have to change those Zim dollars in the black market. So it is speeding up the prices and the exchange rates. So he was supposed to up their salaries in US dollar to make the Zim dollar insignificant, so that they don't need to go to change the black market. Maybe they can use this little money for airtime and for these things, and it will reduce pressure on the black market. He went silent on that. So he was supposed to be dealing with the payments to civil servants and the payment to contractors and raising more as a temporary measure, maybe for the next 3-4 months, paying them in
yeah.
Just wait, because I think that we are now dabbling into the next thing, which I would want then Rufaro you can speak to, because we're talking about the death of ZWL. Treasury, again, in the statement, Treasury is assuming RBZ debt and cleaning up the RBZ balance sheet.
Yeah.
Do you see that as a prelude to the death of ZWL, given everything that you said before?
Yeah, look,
Why is Treasury doing this?
I don't know, because I can't imagine that there was somebody who was willing to give Reserve Bank a line of say $100 million US, but wasn't doing so because they looked at the balance sheet and said, "Oh my gosh, look at this debt!" And now that this debt has been moved from the left hand to the right hand, from central bank to Treasury, that person who was sitting on the sidelines with $100 million is going to say, "Oh, you don't have that debt anymore. Here's $100 million." So I don't understand the motivation.
Okay, to be fair, according to our laws, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't quote the actual statute. But according to our laws, every year, any parastatal that has debt must move it. That is 100% owned by government. That debt must actually be moved to Treasury. So to be fair, he's doing it, albeit lately, but he's doing what the law requires him to do.
Correct.
But because he has done it, do you think that there's an ulterior motive, or what is the idea around him doing it now? You could have done it 2-3 years ago, but he's chosen.
Or you could have done it annually.
You could have done it annually, as is actually required by law.
Yeah. No, the challenge I have is that there's no public information regarding how much debt central bank has. It should be in the public domain with the private players. But
it's about $4.6 billion US.
But now the second point is that government already have a national debt of almost $20 billion.
Yeah.
All right. And yes, you are cleaning the balance sheet of RBZ, but there's no positive effect to the creditor.
No, none whatsoever.
Yeah, because government is broke. So, and I would want to ask a question since we are chairing this session to say, if government now want to service their debts, where are they going to get the money from? Which is the recourse? You can go back to what? Central bank.
My view, and you can correct me, is
yeah, sure.
Every time, historically, every time the central bank, or every time Treasury has cleaned up the central bank balance sheet, the last case being Chinamasa, if you remember.
Correct.
And BT also previously, before we then dollarized, that was a positive thing. But every time they've cleaned up the RBZ balance sheet, it's a precursor to a new currency. That's all I have to say.
And it
about
happened on when Tulip announced this TSP.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So every time they've done it, they're preparing us for a new currency.
Well, they clearly don't understand that for a currency to work, it requires confidence. And so, and that brings us back to the future of the Zim dollar. How long is it going to last? I think in an ideal world, we would be very disciplined about the way we manage the Zim dollar. And I think that's a pipe dream. If you look at the history of the currency since the turn of the century, since actually 1998, it's been an unmitigated disaster. We went through hyperinflation, dollarized, and now we're in hyperinflation again in less than 2 decades. It's unprecedented. I mean, even the Hungaries and Venezuelas and Argentinas of this world have not been, this dramatic. So,
you mean Hungary?
Yeah, Hungary, the country. Sorry. So,
Okay. Good point.
So, I think it's wishful thinking to expect reform in the way we handle the Zim dollar. And so, my view is the sooner it dies and we dollarize and everybody's getting paid in dollars and can plan their lives, the better.
But you're just like starting another cycle.
No, but I think in the next cycle, you see, because
then we start.
You're familiar with that maxim.
We start bastardizing the US dollar.
You're familiar with that maxim. Once bitten, twice shy. Okay.
How many times have we been bitten?
Let's apply that thinking to the current Nostro US dollar balances. Okay. I suspect that the average Zimbabwean is much more comfortable holding cash in their home or in a cash deposit box than in a Nostro bank account. I think that for the most part, those accounts are transactional. They are held by people and the people who hold balances for long are people who have no choice. These institutions that are very highly regulated and they have limited opportunities to dispose of their Nostro balances. But I think everybody else, their Nostro account is a transactional account.
Do you know how much money we actually have in our Nostro balances?
No.
It's $1 billion US dollars. That's actually one of the highest points we've had in the last, even since 2013. So there are people statutorily who are required to.
Yeah, but remember, when we dollarized, the loans alone were about 4.5 billion.
Yeah, but we had about $1 billion in US dollar cash. Right now, in our banking system, we have $1 billion.
So I suspect that the cash that is at large in people's homes and pockets and safe deposit box is multiples of that billion.
You're suspecting,
yes.
But you don't have facts.
No.
I'm giving you a fact.
I'll tell you why. I'll back it up with some evidence, with some facts. So the economy already, we are told, is 76% USD, 24% Zim dollar. So if you say our GDP is 20 billion, 76% of that is USD. Do you think that, how much cash do you think is required to underpin, that level of
velocity?
I understand. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be as high as 18.
It doesn't have to be.
But so a strong case can be made that it's multiples of $1 billion.
So that we move forward, what I want us to be very clear about is right now we have $1 billion US dollars in our banking system.
Okay.
And that's a threat because we're going through this again. We're going to be bitten again. That $1 billion US dollars is going to turn out to be absolutely nothing. And these are people who are supposed to hold this for whatever reason. Yeah. So when you think of your deltas and when you think of a lot of the mining companies, they're not going to dabble in the parallel market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to keep it. And unfortunately, because they're going to be bitten again for the 10th time, they're never going to invest. Which brings us to something that he did right, that Mtuli did right, which is the scrapping of the 15%. That's for the domestic sales.
Yeah.
So that's actually to encourage US
Deposit,
dollars
yeah,
in the. But, and these are murmurs. These are people who would think that it was a sinister move. It
correct.
wasn't really
Yeah.
out of the goodness of his heart, but really it's driven by the fact that he needs US dollars cash in the nostro balances.
Yeah.
What's the threat on our nostro balances, do you think?
Right, so the threat is the cycle which we're talking about in the last maybe 5 minutes, where we get out of, we are getting into US dollar, through the US dollar, dollarization, but there's a process which has started of coming back of the Zim dollar through the pseudo or fake US dollars. Because when the current transaction for money creation is already happening, when you
With
are-
nostros, basically.
with the nostro basically. So there's a component which is quite significant of the US dollar, which is fake, which is the US dollars in the RTGS, right? So as much as we are moving towards 100% dollarization, there's a build up which is coming in few months later after we have completed the cycle of burial of Zim dollar and to come back. So in short, we are in a replay of 2013 to 2018. And those who have US dollars in the bank will suffer in the same manner we suffered in 2018.
Wow. Okay, the producer is jumping up and down. So the final we were supposed to talk about, and I think we've covered it, which is economic ideology, consistency, stakeholder consensus, debt management.
Yeah.
That's where we need to go in terms of policy consistency. So we've covered that. I think there are two things that we haven't covered, and I hope that we can do justice to these matters. The first is reforming RBZ. Any hope?
There's no hope in reforming RBZ because, as far as I'm concerned, when I look at RBZ's performance in the last 25 years, it has become an instrument of driving the agenda of government of the distortion structures. You can go back to the time of Dr. Gono, when he was talking about Bakos. It was central bank which was leading in that. And it becomes part of the architecture of the political economy of this country. Fast track the current environment where we are. The same central bank knows that the auction system is not the auction system. It's not the Dutch auction system. Those guys are very educated, but they're doing wrong things. Look at even they're insistent. They are running two exchange rates, the willing buyer, willing seller, and that's one exchange rate, official exchange rate window. You also have another official exchange rate of the auction system. So you could see that there's a political interference in the central bank. Now we come to the Minister of Finance now pronouncement, which you are talking about, is delving into the Reserve Bank. So this Reserve Bank is not the Reserve Bank which we were taught when we were at school. It's an instrument of expediting the way politicians must work. That's why when you see the governor, when he refuses in court, the Minister of Finance makes an announcement. And it's not the first announcement. In May last year, soon after the Policy Committee met in deciding that the money supply growth per quarter will be 5%, the President came and announced that we are suspending lending and we are the mandate target is now 0% per quarter, going against the decision of the Policy Committee. So you see that the central bank as it stands now is with the political, and there's no political will to make it independent. It's a weak institution. The current government thinking or mindset, I don't think they understand the reforms. Even starting with the basics, this is my last comment, the basics of the exchange rate management. A number of times, the IMF staff monetary programs has been very clear on the gold coins, right? That these gold coins are useless. You must be building reserves. They refuse. They even make it worse. They're now gold token, right? They talked about liberalizing the exchange rate. They say it's liberalized. So if IMF, which is working with government on an agreed program to guide you to do the right thing, and you refuse. There's no.
So if it can't be reformed, then what should we do? If we get rid of it, then what? What do you replace it with?
No, we can't get off central bank. It's as good as if you have. Right, the Bible says that if your eye is causing you to be promiscuous, remove it. Have you ever seen anyone removing his eye? So the eye still is very important for our functioning, right? But that's the desired thing to do. What I think what is required to do, now coming back to the issue of dialogue, after elections, we need to sit down with government, business, technocrats and everyone, and take note of where we've gone wrong. And also take note of the costs. You're asking about the costs of this disease, right? It is actually very fair to actually do a study and say, what are the costs and what have we lost? Just comparing with our regional comparator countries, Zambia, Botswana, Malawi, Kenya, where were we in 1995, 1996, and where were these
bigger
countries?
than Kenya. Today, exactly. Kenya is 8 times bigger than Zimbabwe.
Exactly. So we should then say this is where we are. That's what they've taken ourselves to, because we began this in 1997, right? But in 1996 we were very good, right? So that's where we need to challenge moral to say, that's where we can't think that the same person who caused the problem will solve the problem. So you need us who are not part of that architect to say, government, this is where we are making mistakes. Let's sign a social contract. Let's agree. Then we begin now to work together as one team. Right now, with them, their mindset, I think they are used to it. Because there's a rent-seeking behavior which people are benefiting on central bank.
I just want to push back a bit. Don't you think that maybe the Zimbabwean government, kwambo? So you go in with all the good intentions, but somewhat there's this chikwambo that we just cannot exercise, we cannot get rid of.
I don't want to say there's chikwambo.
So if you look at the coup, again, there was a lot of goodwill, and I would like to give the president the benefit of the doubt that he actually wanted to change, but he gets in and he gets caught up in the system. And this system, to what you're saying, which is fair enough, that for the last 25, 30 years has been doing things in a particular way, and you cannot change it, no matter how brilliant you are.
Yeah, so I don't think there's chikwambo, but I think there is very toxic very toxic environment for corruption. And that I will say this without apology. Because when you see the way I look like, I don't have a tummy, right? If I join government, the first thing you see is a tummy, big one, right? And what has happened? Do you think that they go there for body feeding? No, it's corruption. And look at them one by one. Those who went in there, they were slim like me, but they've. So it's not even. It's a system. That's why you see that when you look at even the report, and I want to qualify this from the report of the Auditor General report. We have seen that there's incessant reports of how the money has been squandered. Look at the laptops of
scandal.
Scandal in Parliament, right? Right. But we have a Public Finance Management Act. In Kenya, which you're giving, if you squander money in government, you end 2 years in jail plus 1 million shillings a fine. In Zimbabwe, when you squander that, you must just be loyal to the system. Then you are spot free. We have a Public Finance Management Act, which should be put you behind bars, I think 5 years. And no one has been put behind bars. I'm just talking about civil servants and the policy makers. So the challenge which you have, if we don't mention it, is corruption. It's a time of someone to eat. That's why you see them with the big tummies when they're in. And they change the skin, you see. And when they walk, they even sweat faster. But when they were out, they would go for kilometers walking, no sweating, because the body was dry.
Thank you, Prof, for that. So the final question, and it's something that's closer to your heart than to some of us. But today we have a professor in economics, so maybe you might do a better job in explaining. So maybe you can ask the question. This is informal versus formal GDP, especially when you consider Zimbabwe. Are we capturing the full informal sector and the formal
Yeah, sure. I think that's a question that's actually come to fore this week, because we had Delta report their earnings for the year ended March 2023. And one of the remarkable things in their numbers is that their lug of beer volumes are the highest ever. And if you look at their carbonated soft drinks and sorghum beer volumes as well over the last 5 years, they've been trending up. And just to add more context to that, if you look at their soft drinks, Varun, which owns, which distributes Pepsi in Zimbabwe and the other Pepsi brands, is doing quite well. You know, you see those brands everywhere, and there's some other fizzy drink brands in the market as well that are doing quite well. So the market has got quite has more players today than it did 10 years ago, and you're seeing these record volumes. And so the question is, so there's a narrative that our economy is shrinking, we've got all these problems, things are not looking good, and then you have these numbers from Deltas that are pointing to the consumer drinking more beer, drinking more fizzy drinks. What's happening? What is this telling us?
It's stress. The answer is stress. When you are stressed, you drink more beer.
And sugar? And what about the carbonated soft drinks?
It's the same. Why are you talking about beer? You tell me about clothing. Is it happening at Edgar's? Are they having sales which are going up?
Truth.
Yeah, truth, right? Tell me about education, right? Are we seeing...
in fact, it's less people who are in schools.
Yeah. So that one is stress, right? And you might want to downplay it. Is stress, right? And look at what is happening with the young people, Brongo, right? Why are they drinking? It is stress. And I want to give you figures now why we have stress. In 2018, right, under the new dispensation, people in extreme poverty were 29%, right? Extreme poverty, living on less than $1.90 a day, right? The current stats from Zimstats, people in extreme poverty, I'm talking about the average extreme poverty, right, is 49%, right? So that is what you get when you have the economic environment, but the result, you go and take your stress on beer. So that I was with the beer. But I also want to say, I don't want to underplay the role of the informal sector. The informal sector has been growing very fast. Right. So, and if you look at the sales of these beverages, they are sold through the vendors, and people are looking for survival. So there were many outlets for Delta beverages and the variant you're talking about, over and above to stress. Right. Those who are even buying genuinely because they want to consume. So it shows you a demonstration. You could see the same when they are looking at sales of cement. Right. Yes, there's construction, but again, the informal sector, because it mirrors the formal sector, there was also high volume. So it's a big thing with a big informal sector, and the beauty about the informal sector is very liquid, you see. It's unlike the formal setup. That's why you even see that when you go to bigger supermarkets today, right, your Any Richards, your Pick and Pay, the traffic is very small, right? It's very low. But when you go to the tuck shops, there's high traffic, because there they don't even respect the law, right? So it's also competitive.
But how much of these sales are driven by the arbitrage opportunities? So, for example, although Delta will say 67% of their sales are in US dollars, but 33%.
Well, Delta is 67% only.
Yeah, 67.
Yeah, US dollars.
And if you think about it, 33% of 600, 700 million in turnover, that's over 200 million.
Yeah.
So that's a significant push purely because of arbitrage.
Yeah, correct.
You buy from the stores in RTGS and you sell in dollars outside.
Correct. Yeah. No, the average is quite there. In fact, what I have seen in the market, even manufacturers now are going direct to the informal sector. Where these things used to go to the official wholesalers, and you would see people on the shops, on the doorsteps, who would then swipe, and they will be like looting, literally. But now that gap is now being closed, because they're not going direct. But the arbitrary opportunities were happening on the back of the difference of the two exchange rates. But even now, when you go to the shops now, they're also trying to close those arbitrage, because there are some commodities now which they're now saying are in US dollars. and they are not budging whether there's a statutory instrument 133 of 2022.
Yeah. Prof, you left the last word. The Mtuli has now come out with, as far as the auction is concerned, and I know this is something that's closer to your heart, and he said the auction now will be a true auction. It will be a true Dutch auction. Should we believe him?
Sometimes it's hard to tell parody from reality.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much, everybody. This was a wonderful show. And Rufara has just had the last word. Sometimes it's hard to tell.
Parody from reality.
Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Continue these discussions. This was a lovely chat. Thank you very much, Prof, for having you, for actually agreeing to come here, and we should have more of you.
Yeah.
This was lovely. We enjoyed
it. Thank you for
thoroughly.
Yeah, I'll insist that the producer's next guest is not a teetotaler.
We're taking over the bar. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Cheers.